Hello students, this is a quick maths video about completing the square and circle equations. You know that completing the square is a skill that you learned in your algebra class. You actually need to do this procedure twice simultaneously when you're working with circle equations that are in a non-standard form. So I'm going to show you how to do that. As a reminder, this is the circle equation standard form that has x minus h and y minus k equals r squared. We call this another name instead of just standard form. Let's take a look. There are two types of circle equations that you might have to look at. The first is called the so-called standard form of a circle equation, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Now that is also known as center radius form because you're told the center, which is h comma k, and the radius inside of the equation. It tells us the values for the center hk, like I said before, and the radius r of the circle. So if you have it in this form, it's super easy to say, oh, the center of this circle is h comma k, and the radius is r. However, sometimes the problem will give it to you in so-called expanded form. Expanded form, you can tell because it doesn't have the parentheses. You can also tell because there are values with x squared, there are values with x, y squared, y, and there's sometimes, but not always, a constant on the other side. Sometimes the constant is on the left side, sometimes it's on the right-hand side. The expanded form is okay, but it doesn't immediately tell us what the values are for the center and the radius. It doesn't have it right away. Like there's a way to figure out h and k, but there's not a really good way to figure out r. So the problem is that expanded form, if they give it to you, it's hard to tell what the center and the radius are of the circle. So since it doesn't immediately tell us the values for the center and the radius, what we like to do is take the expanded form and rewrite it into standard form, this form over here, by completing the square. We actually have to do completing the square twice in order to get this equation to look like this equation. Keep in mind, we're not doing anything to the equation in terms of changing its values, we're just rearranging it and making it look different. Here's the steps for completing the square for circle equations. That first step is to move all the numbers, the constant terms, from one side to the other side, and then move all the variable terms onto that other side. So all the numbers on one side, usually I put them on the right. All the variables on the other side, usually I put them on the left. So then we're going to group all the x terms and all the y terms together in a set of parentheses. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Then we're supposed to take the coefficient of x, that's the number that's multiplied by x, divide it by 2 and square it. Why do we do that? There's a long-winded explanation, but suffice it to say, that's what you're supposed to do. Divide it by 2 and square it. Then add this value to the x group and the other side of the equation. Lather, rinse, repeat. Do the same thing for the coefficient of y. And then, last but not least, factor both of these by using the AM method and rewrite each of them as a squared binomial and combine all constant terms. Easy for me to read this off the screen to you, but maybe not as easy to understand what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at some examples here. The first example has x squared plus y squared plus 4y minus 2y minus 20 is equal to 0. And remember, our first step is to move all the constants to one side and the variables to the other side. Well, we only have this one constant, this negative 20. Let's bring it to the other side and make it positive 20. Next, we're going to group all the x terms in one set of parentheses. We'll call it the x group, and the y terms become the y group. Well, x squared and 4x are both x terms, so I'm just going to move them. It's okay to do that because of the commutative property of addition. And then y squared minus 2y, that gets grouped into its own separate group as well. Now we're getting closer to what the standard form looks like, but again, there's no squared here and there's no squared here, so we got to keep going. We're going to take the coefficient of x, which in this case is positive 4, divided by 2, and square it. So that calculation is here. Then we're going to add that to the x group. We're going to add it here. And whatever we add to one side of the equation, we got to add to the other side. Then we're going to do the same thing for y. We're going to take negative 2, which is the coefficient of y. Cut it in half and square it. So negative 2 over 2 is negative 1. Squared is 1. So I'm adding 1 here, and I'm adding 1 here. Color coding it so that you can see where the numbers are coming from. Last, I'm going to factor both the x and the y group and rewrite each of them as a squared binomial. If I factor x squared plus 4x plus 4 using AM method, I'm going to figure out what numbers add together to give me 4, multiply to give me 4, that's 2 and 2. Same thing here, what numbers add to give me negative 2 and multiply to give me 1, that's negative 1 and negative 1. What I can do now is take y minus 1, and say it's y minus 1 squared. Hey look, y minus 1 times itself is y minus 1 squared. Same thing, x plus 2 times itself is x plus 2 squared. At this point, I have x plus 2 squared, y minus 1 squared, 25. I am done. Now I know everything there is to know about the circle in terms of its center and its radius. The center is going to be -2, +1. We flip the signs, right? And the radius is going to be the square root of this number, which is just 5. Moving on to the next and last example. In this example, it looks a little bit different. It actually has fewer terms in it. So what we're going to do is same exact method. Move all constants and all variables. Looks like all the constants are already where they're supposed to be. Group all the x terms and all the y terms. Well, there's only one x term here, and there's 2 y terms. The next thing I'm going to do in green is take the coefficient of x and divide it by 2 and square it. Well, there's no x term here. There's an x squared, but there's no x term. So 0/2 squared is just 0. I'm not adding nothing to nowhere. Then the coefficient of y is a little bit more straightforward. 12 divided by 2 squared is 36. I add 36 to both sides. Now I factor the thing that I can factor. This becomes y plus 6, y plus 6. The x squared just stays as x squared. The y plus 6 becomes y plus 6 squared. 26 is the constant on the right-hand side. Now I know everything there is to know about the circle. I know the center is 0 because there's no number here in the parentheses. -6 because this is a +6. And the square root of 26 is my radius. All right, this was a quick maths video about completing the square and circle equations. Good luck studying.